Hello, I'm Stephen Mitchell, and if you haven't already heard, there will be major changes coming up to the PMP exam. The last day that you can take the existing format is June 30th of 2020. Everything from July 1st on will be a new format, so I just wanted to give some information, put it out there what those changes are so you can make an informed decision on when you want to take the test so you're aware of it, and let's just talk through some things. So first, the reference for the information I'm about to give is the different companies that give the test prep material. They teach it, and I've also verified this with PMI.org. So, in a nutshell, the biggest thing is that the current format will only be 50% of the new format. So 100% of the material that's currently on the exam is only going to represent 50% of the new format. The new 50% of the exam will be an agile approach. I'm sure you've heard that buzzword. If you haven't, you need to now know what it is because it's going to be very important. So they have not technically changed the material that they're currently presenting, they've just condensed it. So if you would like a brief overview of what those changes are, you need to go to PMI.org. If you click on certifications, then click on overview, then click on PMP, you'll see three links to the right of the web page. The second link is an overview of the current format. The third link is an overview of the new format. So if you download those documents, they'll look like this. They look exactly the same if you're looking at the cover page, only when you open it up, the date on one will be June 15th, which is the current format, and the date on the next one will be this year. So 2020 format, I'm sorry, June of 2019, but it'll say for the July 2020 exam update. So that's kind of a Cliff Notes version of what the updates will be, but let's talk through it. Currently, the format is 5 process groups. We go from initiating to planning to execution, monitoring and controlling, and we end with closing. One of the biggest changes in the new format is that there are only 3 process groups now. Those process groups are people. The second one is process. The third one is business environment. So I guess I'll try to bring that up. We're going from 3 to 5. What they've done is not only change the process groups, but they've also changed the number of processes. So in the existing format, we have 49. In the new format, there will be 35. Now, what I'm personally not aware of is, what I'm personally not aware of is that the 35 may not be just 35 from the original 49 we have now. Maybe it's a new process in that 35. So I'm just not personally aware of those details, but it's something that you may want to look into if you're thinking about it or if you're looking at comparing what's current versus what is new. But what I can tell you are the percentages. These are the percentages. We've gone through this before in the 5 project groups. This is the new format. Now, let's go through it a little bit. People is 42%. Process is 50%, and business environment is 8%. If you look at it, remember what I said earlier, 50% of the existing format will still be on the new exam. And the other 50 is the new agile predictive type approach. People, what does that mean? It doesn't mean people from, we're going to do a manpower loading and see how we schedule the people on the project. What the people references is how you manage people. And I'll get to the how. It's how you do it. The existing format focuses on what to do. This is the process that you should follow. This is the project process: initiating, planning, and so on and so forth. So People, what does that mean? It's how you do it. It's how you lead the team. It's managing conflict, leading a team. It's the project manager or management characteristics that you should be using as a project manager and as a leader in order to develop your people. It focuses on the people and how you manage them, not necessarily just what. So I'll pull this back up again. The next is the process. This is the 50% that is on the current format. So they haven't eliminated it. Everything that's there is still there. It's just only 50% of it. So this still encompasses initiating, planning, executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. And then we wrap up with the business environment. Now, the business environment has to deal with the environment of the business, kind of regulatory things that you should be doing, things you should know from a company or a project perspective from a business point of view. People, process, and then business environment. So that's the gist of the changes. Now, the PMBOK has not changed. The PMBOK is still currently on the 6th edition. So I don't believe they plan on changing the PMBOK to the 7th edition for another 2 to 3 years. And that's what it is at this point. So the PMBOK hasn't changed. They've just added the agile approach to have to test. What does this mean for you? Well, just from my personal experience, when I was preparing for the exam, it was during the transition from the 5th edition to the 6th edition of the PMBOK. And when I started, all my material was from the 5th edition. And so I started to learn it, and then I said, well, I need to know what the new edition is. I came across, or I was given a 90-page or 100-page document that said, this is this, it's now that, this is this, it's now that. Well, instead of learning that, it was much easier just to throw away all my 5th edition material and learn everything from the 6th edition. Learn it correctly the first way. This is only a small example for the changes that are coming up. The changes that are coming up for the exam, as we just went over, are more drastic by far. So, what you need to decide is when you want to take this exam, thinking of the amount of time it's going to take you to prepare. Let's say you give yourself 9 to 12 weeks to take the current format. What you don't want to do, or what you also need to consider, is if you do not pass on your first attempt. And by the way, by all means, do not get discouraged if you don't pass on your first attempt. A lot of people don't pass on their first attempt, but now you go back knowing what you should focus on. But what you don't want to do is get caught in a scenario to where if you don't pass on your first attempt and your second attempt is past July 1st, now when you go back, it's a totally different format. It's not retaking and honing in your skills from the first attempt. It's new material, new content, new format, new everything. What you also need to consider is that the closer you get to June 30th, which is the last time you can take it in an existing format, the more seats will fill up. So you can say, well, I'll just turn around and take it. What you have to think about that also, you don't want to burn yourself out. Go through all this test prep, take it, go back, learn some more, take it again, or you don't want to come back and take it the next day or the next week. You want to give yourself some time to debrief and focus on what you need. So yeah, I've got it in my plan. I want to take it 4 weeks after my first attempt. Well, if the seats are already filled, you physically can't sign up for a date before July 1st. So it's not 100% on your terms. You just need to consider that the seats will start to fill up. Also, it works to your advantage right now that the material on the internet, material in books, and what people are able to give you advice on today, the information is out there. It's endless. There is less information for you to reference on the new format. You will be one of the first few groups to take the exam in the new format. So you've got a lot more material to do now. You still have time to push yourself and go ahead and do it. If you're thinking about taking the exam, there's no better time than now. That was the case before they made the change. This is just more justification to go ahead and do it. So just think about it, but you don't want to get stuck in that transition phase. Okay. I've previously posted 3 videos on PMP exam prep, so I just want to briefly touch upon what's still valid in those videos and what the new exam format can potentially change from that. So in part 1, we went over a good way to set up a format for the test itself, what you can expect from the process. Every single thing for part 1 that we reviewed is still valid. No matter what the changes in the test are, there's still 200 questions. There's still 4 hours to take the test. So you can look at part 1 and it should be valid no matter when you take the test. In part 2, we went over some questions, some examples of some questions, how you interpret those questions, things you should be looking for. I believe that everything from part 2 is still valid. Just be aware that it may be valid for a fewer or less percentage of the exam. So I can't tell you what the new exam questions are because we're not at July 1st and I haven't taken that exam. So just be aware in part 2, it's still valid. It just may be valid either for only 50% of the new format, or it's still valid for 100% of the format. You just need to take more of the concept and the approach that PMI will take. They've been giving this exam for I don't know how many years. We'll have new exam questions, but their approach and how they ask it, those tricks are still embedded in the part 2 video that we reviewed. On part 3, we ended with the exam material itself and tools you have at your disposal. That video, I believe the first half will soon become obsolete because we went over initiating, planning, monitoring, controlling, or executing, monitoring, controlling. That part of the video will no longer be valid. The second part for tools and techniques, I believe you can still use that for how you should prepare and what you have at your disposal. Just make sure you're using the updated materials. So I believe you can still reference those things, and hopefully this video has given you the information you need to evaluate or understand what the changes are coming on the new exam. But my advice to you would be just go ahead and take it. If you're thinking about it, do it. If you know you cannot do it, however, and you know you need to do it after July 1st, I'd start using the new material as much as you can and try to stay out of the transition phase. So once again, good luck on your exam prep. Thanks.